After years of dictatorship, everything escalated on the 23rd of March, 1991, when a rebel group known as the Revolutionary United Front (RUF), led by Fodi Sanko, a former Sierra Leonean army corporal and radical revolutionary, crossed into eastern Sierra Leone from neighboring Liberia and launched a violent attack on the border town of Bomaru in the Kailahun district. The RUF claimed it was fighting to overthrow a corrupt government and create a more just society, though in practice, it quickly became known for violence, looting, and exploitation. The launch of these attacks marked the beginning of a brutal, decade-long conflict that would devastate the country, displace millions, and lead to widespread human rights atrocities. The RUF was heavily backed by Charles Taylor, the notorious warlord and rebel leader who was, at the time, leading an insurrection in Liberia through his group, the National Patriotic Front of Liberia, NPFL. Taylor's support for the RUF was strategic. He aimed to destabilize Sierra Leone, gain control over its rich diamond fields, and expand his regional influence. The rebels used shock tactics, including burning homes, killing civilians, and abducting children, in an effort to create chaos and terror. The government of President Joseph Saidu Momo initially underestimated the threat posed by the RUF. Early military responses were disorganized, with soldiers often looting and abandoning their posts. The Sierra Leone Army, SLA, which had been neglected and underfunded for years, responded slowly and ineffectively. Lacking discipline and proper resources, the army committed atrocities themselves, further alienating the population. Civilians began to form self-defense militias out of desperation, known as the Civil Defense Forces, CDF. These militias would later play a central role in the war. The eastern region where the war began was rich in alluvial diamonds. These resources quickly became a major objective for the rebels, who used them to fund their operations through illegal trade. The term blood diamonds would later become globally known, as diamonds from conflict zones like Sierra Leone were sold to fund war. Additionally, foreign mercenaries, arms dealers, and neighboring actors became involved, turning what began as an internal rebellion into a regional conflict with complex international dimensions. By the end of 1991, entire districts in the east and south of Sierra Leone had fallen under rebel control. The state had lost control over large swaths of territory, and the central government in Freetown was on the defensive. By the end of 1991, Sierra Leone was in a full-blown civil war. The Revolutionary United Front quickly became synonymous with terror and inhumanity. Its fighters, many of them abducted children, were forced to commit atrocities, including rape, mutilation, and mass killings. The group's signature brutality involved amputating limbs of civilians, a tactic meant to terrorize communities and punish those suspected of supporting the government. Women and girls were often enslaved as bushwives, and civilians were forced to work in diamond mines under horrific conditions. The RUF's actions shocked the world and led to their classification as a terrorist group by international observers. At the climax of the war, Valentine Strasser, a 24-year-old captain, was thrust into combat against a fierce and unconventional enemy, the RUF. The soldiers under his command were under-equipped, poorly paid, and exhausted from months of fighting. They often went months without receiving salaries, ammunition, or food rations. Strasser and his comrades became disillusioned with the government of President Joseph Saidu Momo, who had been in power since 1985, following the retirement of President Siaka Stevens. The final trigger came when Strasser and his fellow officers were told that they would not be receiving their long overdue salaries and that no reinforcements or supplies were forthcoming. This betrayal became the breaking point. The group decided to take action, not just to demand their pay, but to seize control of the government they believed had failed the country. On April 29, 1992, Captain Valentine Strasser and about 30 heavily armed soldiers, using military trucks and armored vehicles, launched a bold and unexpected march on Freetown, the capital. The distance between the Eastern Front and Freetown is vast, several hundred kilometers, but the group faced little resistance along the way. The fact that they were able to reach the capital without being stopped reflected the complete breakdown of command and control within the army and the state. When they arrived in the city, they quickly took control of key military and government installations, including the state broadcaster and the presidential residence. President Joseph Momo, caught off guard and politically isolated, fled. Some reports suggest he attempted to flee to neighboring Guinea, while others indicate he took refuge within the country before eventually being exiled. No shots were fired in the capital. The coup was literally bloodless. With the government collapsed, Strasser and his comrades formed a new military junta, the National Provisional Ruling Council, NPRC. At just 25 years old, Strasser was declared head of state and chairman of the NPRC. The group justified their actions by citing the rampant corruption, mismanagement, and incompetence of the previous regime. Strasser addressed the nation via radio and promised to stabilize the country, restore law and order, and eventually return Sierra Leone to democratic governance. His rise stunned the world.